Hey, it's Mazzy here. Someone asked me where I get my ideas to do videos. It's not rocket science. I love music, and I get inspired by different things. Obviously, the whack-a-moles is when I just want to randomly just showcase some records. I'm in the mood to tape something, record something, and I just come here and really turn the camera on and go for it. The Where's the Music Stupid videos? I pull five. I kind of look around the library here and just look through the collection, pull something that speaks to me in the moment. Music that that like sense memory as an actor, that bring up a memory from when I got the record, when I listened to the music, or I'm just in the mood for a certain artist I've been listening to or something. This video is an inspirational video because of an Instagram post I just did showcasing Rubber Soul, the Capitol Records Rubber Soul. So this video is essentially a ramble video, but about how Capitol Records screwed over the Beatles and basically put their catalog out up until Sgt. Pepper that had nothing to do with the artist's intent. And artist's intent has been an ongoing conversation lately. And I was inspired this, and I will say this if you're watching, Michael Fremer has inspired me several times on videos. I think we have a lot more in common than not. Don't have the knowledge and the expertise of the equipment gear and the sound of this, what he has, and I admire him for that. I think we both have our own versions of our own shtick. We both think we're funny. Whether we are, that's up to you and the audience, and that's fine too. So if you're watching, Michael, this is a response in this Instagram post, Mazzy's Music. So follow me on Instagram. In this Instagram post, I showcased the Capitol stereo record, one of these I have, and I said, this is one time Capitol got it right. Oh, that sparked a response from Tracking Angle, Michael Fremer. You can go see the comments there. He came in hot, and he said, I'm paraphrasing here, how Capitol really screwed over against what the Beatles wanted. Instead of opening up with Drive My Car, they do something completely different. And let me say this right up. Yes, Capitol did not do what the Beatles wanted to do. And if you don't know this, this is obvious for people of a certain age. Capitol in America passed on the Beatles initially. They had first refusal to put out anything that Parlophone and EMI put out in America. They passed on the Beatles. So VJ and then Tolly and Swan, I won't get into those things, like Introducing the Beatles came out before Meet the Beatles. They passed on everything. Finally, Capitol, end of, I think actually, I Want to Hold Your Hand maybe came out on the day Kennedy was shot. I could be wrong on that, but someone is going to look it up and tell me. But around that time in late November '63, this wasn't the intent. Capitol Records is something completely different. In the UK, the Beatles wanted value for their audience. They didn't put their singles on albums. In the UK, they had 14 tracks. In America, 12 tracks, singles, reconfiguration. Basically, I guess you could say for every 2 albums the Beatles actually made and put out in the UK, Capitol had 3 albums. That's kind of an average. It's not exact science, so don't call me on that. That's an average. And those of us growing up, these are the records we heard. Also, Dave Dexter, the producer, in-house producer at the Capitol Tower, added reverb, changed the sound of the records, and made them different. They decided that's what American radio and American audiences wanted to hear. That's how these rock and roll records should sound. Now, are they wrong? Probably yes. I know the Beatles weren't enamored with the Capitol records, but they sold records. Now, Michael Fremer is, what 6, 7 years older than me. So he most likely, I think he said this, he got into the UK versions obviously way before I did. I didn't get my first UK version until the end of 1967 when I got a UK version of Sgt. Pepper. I had the American one since it came out in June, I think. And then I got a UK version. And then into 67 and 68. And 68, Tower Records opened their second store, Columbus and Bay, San Francisco, huge import section. So I was able to pick up till that point all the UK records of the Beatles, and I think then I was getting the stereo ones, so I didn't have the mono ones then of the UK. Now remember too, Capitol put these out, and these are the ones we were used to. These are the ones we heard. I don't know anyone of my generation, any of my friends complain that there's something wrong. There's something wrong with these sounding records. Of course, we had different record players then. We just love these songs. Obviously, if you're in the UK and you know what this album should be with Drive My Car, this is not that. But I would argue this is an album that works better musically. Forget reverb, forget less tracks. Of course, you put 12 tracks, you're going to make more money because you pay less publishing. So Capitol is making a lot more money not having to pay all the publishing rights as well, too. That's probably not the main reason, but that's why American records usually had 12 tracks rather than the 14 in the UK. So the singles were put on all their records up through this period. Sgt. Pepper was the cross. They got a chance to renegotiate their contract with Capitol Records, plus the nature of that album, Sgt. Pepper. You couldn't split it up. So from Sgt. Pepper on, the American records jive with the British editions, although there are some exceptions. Was it the end of 65 or 66, the Oldies album that came out only in the UK. Later in 69, the Hey Jude, it was called first the Beatles again, then Hey Jude, that Alan Klein comp screwed up too because he put 2 old songs instead of just the new stuff. That was bad. But I would argue that Capitol did some gems. Now, this is one of them. As I said, this to me is more of a folk rock record. This emulates what Dylan was doing with the Byrds. It was probably accidental too. I don't know if they really thought this was a more woodsy, acoustic, what we now call Americana from these Britishers. I mean, you look at this with the leather coats. This looks like a country western album from Liverpool in a way. It's got that folk sense. Opening up with I've Just Seen a Face, going into Norwegian Wood. Of course, you got It's Only Love, Girl, I'm Looking Through You. There's a great, Michelle, a great acoustic feel to, 2/3 of the songs on here that give this a beauty, that make this record song-wise wonderful. Now, rip a CD, take the British versions of these songs so they're not these, quote, mixes, and make your own version of this album. If you're in the UK and if you've never heard the running order of this, it'll be jarring at first, just like it was jarring when we finally heard the UK version of this. Because remember, Drive My Car in our country was, in the US, was on yesterday and today. So let's talk about a few other records here. You'll see up here, now this is into the 1970s. These are the 2 gold and platinum records that I got from record labels during my retail time in the 1970s. Gold records sometimes were given to auxiliary people, radio station DJs, program directors, people in retail as a kind of a, grease on the wheel gift to you. That's a Boz Scaggs Silk Degrees that I worked on a project, 1977, I believe. But that is probably the worst Beatle comp, especially cover-wise, that John Lennon hated. So I'm kind of embarrassed. The only Beatle gold record I have doing a huge display merchandising contest in San Francisco, that is Rock and Roll Music. That horrible cover that they put on that looks like a Beach Boys rock and roll jukebox hamburger, it doesn't fit the music. So in error, in my, obviously everyone hated that cover artwork. And of course, of all the gold records that I have, that's my only gold record. The other one's platinum. But the only gold record is from a really shitty ass album. I think another album where Capitol possibly even accidentally got lucky and made a brilliant release, and this is the Beatles' second album, Beatles' second American Capitol record. This is the Beatles' album that has a wonderful array of covers. It has Roll Over Beethoven, You Really Got a Hold on Me, Devil in Her Heart, Money, Long Tall Sally, Please, Mr. Postman. Then, of course, it supplements with originals. I'll get you. She loves you. I call your name. Thank you, girl. You can't do that. I love this record. This cover art has been emulated by several other artists, especially indie band, including Yola Tango put out a collection that covers, that really takes this cover and adapts it to a CD of theirs. I'm not sure if there's a vinyl version, but just the way this comes out is so great. Now, I'm not going to defend the added reverb and that thing, but when we got this record, this was friggin' great. This is a blaster. This really is the one that drove your parents away in 1964, even more so, more than the first Meet the Beatles album. But I will say, this is the book you should read that really supports the reasoning that this could be the greatest rock and roll album ever under the Beatles' name. Of course, this isn't a court of law, but to have an expert witness to support my opinion on this great album, this great rock and roll album that Capitol hobbled together with singles and album tracks, I give you Dave Marsh. Dave Marsh was a writer and editor for Cream magazine, for Rolling Stone. He wrote for Playboy. He wrote the Rolling Stone record guides, or he curated them, edited them, of the greatest rock and roll records, greatest pop records of all time, the 500 greatest records. And let me just read the beginning here. The Beatles' second album ran only 22 minutes with just 11 songs, many of which the group didn't write. Despite that, the album personifies the Beatles, the world's greatest rock and roll band, according to rock and roll critic Dave Marsh. With its overload of rock and roll, R&B, and early soul influence, including Roller Beethoven, Long Tall Sally, the Beatles' second album offers a great vantage point from which to see the group's enormous impact on popular music and culture. Marsh breaks new ground by focusing on the Beatles' U.S. recordings and how they evolved from the British releases at a time when the two nations' approach to rock and roll production were vastly different. So if you want to read sort of a good overview in support, and there's some critical things about Capitol Records, rightly so, this is a great read. It's an easy read, and it kind of really emulates and supports this theory, how this is a great rock and roll record. I mean, fuck, you don't need a book. Just play the record and turn it up on your stereo and see what you think, okay? A lot of times the sound of these records and what we like is really based on what we heard when we were young and what we got used to. And of course, most of us younger Americans played the Capitol records. We were used to the sound of those reverb-drenched albums. Dave Dexterization, where he added this sound that he thought was right for American audiences. I mean, the Beatles didn't like what they did. The Beatles didn't like that their singles were on albums, but they sold a lot of friggin' records, and we bought those records, and most of us love those records. We all love those records then. Now, one in particular that I remember that I really, it was like day and night when I heard it, and that is She's a Woman. The American She's a Woman is reverb drenched. When I finally got the UK version of that guitar thing at the very beginning is so dry, it seemed like it was missing something to me. Yes, that was the way the Beatles intended to be. There was no reverb. It was a dry song. But I would argue, and I would just tell you, maybe not argue, for my taste, that American Capitol version of She's a Woman kicks ass over the more subdued British version, the way the Beatles intended it to be. Capitol put out this monstrosity with this cover. I love this cover. This was in a way, some say an anti-Vietnam protest in 1966, 65, 66, photographed by Roger Whittaker, who was really into the surrealists and did a whole series of photographs that are kind of somewhat conceptual, and someone from Capitol slapped this on this record. Now, Capitol wanted to have product out and not wait till the summertime when the Beatles, what would become Revolver, would come out that summer, August of 66. So they put this out. They grabbed singles that hadn't been on albums up to that point, obviously Yesterday and We Can Work It Out and Day Trip or Act Naturally, those songs, and pull these together, but they wanted to make a full album. EPs really weren't happening in the States. Capitol tried, I believe, 2. VJ tried 1. Even though they sold, they weren't a thing as much as they were, as big as they were in the United Kingdom. So they wanted more songs, so they reach out to George Martin. And he gives them 4 songs to put on here that would come on Revolver. Of course, that means when Revolver came out in America, it's really a butchered album. That's where I think Revolver falls short, and Capitol, didn't do something that is successful. Revolver is my number 1 album in terms of faves of the Beatles, and of course the UK one is the one. But again, I was used to, for at least a year and a half, 2 years, I was used to the American Revolver. Of course, I'm not going to even get into the difference of mixes and things, but Capitol, they were definitely hit and miss. And I will agree with Michael Fremer and others who feel that, it's not what the Beatles intended, but there were certain gems in Capitol Records' American catalog that, from my point of view, one man's opinion, stand out. In the UK, they released this, the songs from Magic Moves Tour, as a double EP. These are the songs from that film that really flopped when shown black and white on Boxing Day in the UK. We didn't get this in America. What we got in America, this is another time when Capitol Records, to me, exceeded the Beatles with this. They made it an album. I would argue this is the better psychedelic album of the Beatles. This is more psychedelic than Sgt. Pepper from my point of view. They expanded the EP. They put those great singles, Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane, I'm the Walrus, Baby You're a Rich Man, All You Need Is Love, and made this a perfect record. The book from the EP is inside the record. Perfect. Unfortunately, Capitol screwed up not getting the proper stereo mixes of everything. So that's where, strangely enough, it wasn't until the early 1970s, I'm thinking 73 or so, German Hörzu. Hörzu is basically a television magazine in Germany. They asked for the proper stereo tapes from EMI. They get the proper stereo tapes. And this is the first time all the songs on side 2 are in stereo. And this is a fabulous version, whether it's the Hörzu here or the one with the Apple logo. I think they're the same plates. Sounds fabulous. I remember getting this and hearing the intro of I Am the Walrus, and it had an extra beat, and I flipped out. Going back to Rubber Soul, it was really fun hearing differences, whether it's in a mix or just a slightly different version. That wasn't a thing early on. And for years, that even wasn't a thing for me, except for with the Beatles. But I originally had the mono version of this. And the song on side 2, I'm Looking Through You, I finally, a few months later, got a stereo copy. Started out the mono, got the stereo. And I couldn't believe what I heard at the opening of I'm Looking Through, a false guitar start. Da-dun, dun, 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 da-da-da-dun, da-dun, dun, 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 da-da-dun, and it goes into the song. They didn't clip it off. Was someone not paying attention? Did they think that was a cool intro? Did they think that's what the Beatles intended? Who knows? Accidentally or not, this is a friggin' great record. And again, I personally argue, for my personal taste, that this is the better version. This makes, I take that back, not that it's a better record. This makes for a better listen of this record, and it makes it a different mood to the record. It changes it up. So that's it. Kind of a fun little ramble. Thank you, Michael, for the inspiration. I do appreciate it. We don't always have to agree on things. Just play the music. So thanks again. Mazzy loves you.